You may perhaps grow in humility because you can't go around telling everybody. And he said you won't get the fine courtesy that and other marks of distinction that religious frequently get, half fare here, or donations there. He says you have to, nobody knows that, and you're just taken as another layperson. So he said there's where your humility might come in, but in itself it isn't an end. So this is another virtue. And so it's not imposed by the general laws that constitutes it. It's not in there. It's something that which the first of the pontifical institutes found to be useful to them in having entree to any and every kind of a secular environment where they figured they could exercise their postulate. I think at times we need to make distinctions, though, if it really served the purpose of the institute, for it to be known by an individual. I think then that those in charge or the responsibility would need to have another look and to say, in this case, what do we do? For instance, the Archbishop of the or the Bishop of the Diocese has a right to know it, of course, and does know it. He gets a report every year. The nature of the life and any documentation about it and advertisement about it is wide open. It's just when it comes to saying that Miss So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so is a member, that they prefer that reserve because they have greater freedom of movement. And yet, I will understand what you say. In America, there's usually a reaction to that in which they say, you're sneaky, and we don't like that.
Well, you have to be careful that you're not considered, subversive or in part of the underground church or something similar to that. And I think you also have to bear in mind that there's no discretion as far as revealing the identity of the Institute. It's merely the identity of individual members. Now, when we rewrote our rule, we wrote into it the fact that, with the permission of your local superior, you could reveal your identity when you believed that it was necessary. And that's what we have always worked on here. If it works to the betterment of the Institute and not to the detriment of yourself, then we've been perfectly willing to have a person reveal her identity. And I do think this, seeing how our consecration is fitting into the world and the changing world of today, I do believe that as more and more religious come out of habits into secular clothing, that it's going to meld to the point where we will be able to reveal our identity, and it's not going to create the sensation that it created back in 1950 or 1960. Or even back in 1970.
I think that your statement that one has a right to their private life, I think that's a very good explanation, because there are, after all, there are certain aspects of our lives that I'm talking about just our own private lives. We don't reveal. There's so many things. We have and even in familial surroundings, there are various things which one wouldn't feel as though they were being deceitful. I think essential deception would be pretending to be something that one was not, or something like that. There's authenticity.
I think, though, the difficulty in understanding, and for clarification, would be the imposition of secrecy. It would be different if you were saying each person could use discretion on when and where and what circumstance they would, and maybe that's what you eventually evolved to. I don't say you would have to proclaim it every time you went forward.
We have almost come to that, Father, when we say that you discuss this with your superior.
You made a very good point on that to me, Barbara, was the fact that it gives you one more safeguard. For example, if a person were not to consult the superior and went to tell their family, they might well regret it. Whereas if they talk to the superior, it puts it off for a period of time, and she says that that can make a big difference on their thinking.
Yeah.
Looks at it more objectively, too.
In more than one case, a person has said, how about, may I reveal it to so-and-so and so-and-so? And we've said, well, think it over a little while. And then we've said, did you? No, I just decided that it wasn't the thing to do. Whereas
the
in
people-
the first blush of, enthusiasm, you might tell somebody.
Some of the people are in the armed forces. We have some in the Marines and the Navy, and they said that it would really be a handicap to them, and they prefer not at all to have it known. A person could be, as in Italy, for instance, they're members of the parliament, or one is a minister or assistant minister of education in the central federal government, and she said to me, she'd consider it, it's not here. But that's why it has some flexibility to it, which can be exercised depending on circumstances.
Essentially, it's a vocation to be a Christian, so you don't have to identify each facet.
That's right. And that's why I say you have a right to your private life, Father. You don't really have to tell everybody why you are leading your Christian life in a more strict fashion, for instance.
An interesting thing happened right in this house when the Archbishop came to dedicate it in the June of the 64, was it? He called me aside and said, I want to ask you questions about this. He was always very quick. And so I answered his questions. And among other things, this question of reserve came up. And he was preparing, to address the congregation, to make some remarks. So I said, oh, I see what you mean. You don't tell him about that. I said, no, because it is a private state of perfection. So I figured we had everything squared away, and he got up and announced it to everybody.
Here were all my Protestant relatives sitting there, and he gets up, and he thanks Barbara Ottinger and the members of the Secular Institute. I was ready to kill him.
The only thing is, I think
They
a lot of
didn't-
them don't know what a secular institute
No,
is. I think
it
it's
went,
right
it
over
went
there.
straight over here, but they didn't really know. But,
Assistant
Yeah.
vocation directors, no.
yeah.
After it was over, the Archbishop said, how'd I do?
Yeah. You, Father, you
Yes,
know.
I've thought about this, as an assistant. I do think that our thinking clarified and keep on clarifying itself on two levels. First of all, just for want of a name, of the practical level of whether it's working out, etc., and whether it's good or better to do otherwise in a particular circumstance. But I think there is another level, and that's like the theological level of just the basic reason, quite apart from the practical ramifications here and now. And I think the best explanation that I have is that you mentioned and was given to me by a friend of the Institute. He was an Italian passing through, and there's this one that the avoiding of labels is particularly good. And I've gone on from that your life is, and your witness is, a dedicated Christian layperson in the world. And this is for me, the fundamental point. And anything that would detract or obscure the very purpose of that, the hiddenness of that, must be secondary.
Yes, that's interesting, because at times people will say, well, I'm talking about an individual who happens to be a member and whose identity as a member is not known to them. They would say, there's something about that girl or about that lady that's different. And they would go on to explain what they mean. And of course, it would be nothing else than this living of her Christian witness. And that always pleases me, because I feel, well, this is one way in which their identity can be known and recognized, thank God, that they are giving witness to their faith in a very strong and forceful way, without the label. That's true.
We have some girls who don't mind at all having their identity revealed, and we use them to go out and talk to groups. As long as they don't object, then this is just fine. There are other girls who feel very, very strongly that they cannot reveal their identity for professional reasons. Both of the women who are going to talk to you tomorrow morning on the idea of secularity. Elsa is a major in the Marine Corps. Kay is a professor of microbiology at the University of Virginia. And both of them feel very strongly that, their identity must be not revealed.
I have 5 minutes to 12. I believe that's the right time, close to it. The Mass is scheduled for 12.
Responsible of the reasons the person
It's how the Spirit is moving.
Father in heaven, we ask you to, again, as you did this morning, make known your presence among us by the wisdom and the knowledge that is imparted. We ask also to give us the spirit of cooperation with this knowledge so that it may be used to further your kingdom here on earth. We ask this through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
So be it. Next on our program would be the discussion of the Constitution and Rule of Life of the Secular Institute of Missionaries. Here we're getting down, of course, to a specific institute, no longer talking in general terms about secular institutes, but about a particular one. Having this morning heard the historical summary or survey of the Secular Institute of Missionaries, we're now able to get down to this very important part of the precise constitutional rule of life. As far as the relationship of the two is concerned, and this will be the extent of my remarks because Father DePaul is going to develop this for you. The Constitution, of course, contains the general norms that govern the life of the entire institute. The rule of life is a specification, shall we say, is a book of regulations, guidelines, which translate the general constitution in terms of the life of the individual missionary. There are even certain spaces there, usually, in which it says the missionary shall ... and it may have to do with her promise of poverty or even her sufficient amount of rest or things that are quite specific, adapting it to the individual person almost like a garment that's tailor-made to show the flexibility and adaptability of the directives that are given there, based certainly, and they must be based upon the general constitution, but then designed to fit first the particular territory, in this case, say the territory of the USA, and then even more specifically the person herself. This too is something for which we're very grateful in reference to the Secular Institute, because it has from the beginning taken into consideration the differences in culture, the national differences, and even as far as it may be possible, local and certainly the individual difference. That would be the relationship between the Constitution and the rule of life. Somewhat differently, perhaps, from the way it works, say, in our life as friars minor, in which the rule of life is the basic law given to us by St. Francis himself. And then the Constitution is based on that, and that Constitution changes from time to time, reflecting changes in the Church. But here, while the Constitution also does change time to time, the rule of life or norm of life is a more specific expression of the general guidelines of the Constitution itself. So, Father DePaul, the floor is yours, and I'll be glad to listen and to disagree or agree with you. Yeah. I have copies of that to you.
Yes.
I'll just we'll keep a copy handy here while you're talking. Go ahead, Father. Get it over here.
Perhaps you've heard of the George Hillel. And Hillel lived several years before the time of Christ. And he was from a small town outside the big city of Jerusalem. And perhaps because he did live in a small town, wasn't too familiar with what was going on in the big town, at least among the rabbis. But one day he was visiting the temple in Jerusalem and discussing with the other rabbis to try to continue an education, I guess, program they had too, where they talk about Jewish rabbis when they get together. So he was there visiting, and on the occasion, a pagan king visited the city and wanted to come and discuss with the rabbis about the Jewish religion. And he said part of his time he gave to serious consideration about various religions, and he found some very good aspects in every religion, but he seemed to think that the Jewish religion had everything that he really desired and wanted. But his biggest objection was it was too cumbersome, there was too many rules and regulations. So he said, I'm a very simple man, really, even though I'm very powerful and own much land, much property, and many people working for me. Actually, I'm a very, very simple man. And if things are kept simple, I can understand them. And I find that your religion is very cumbersome, even though I admire people and people seem concerned to be dedicated and worship their God and do many things for their God. So I ask you, the rabbis, this question, that if someone could explain to me the whole Jewish law by standing on one foot, and then whatever time it takes them, and then put that foot down, fine, then I will accept your religion. So because I guess he thought people couldn't stand on one foot for too long time, that would have to be short and brief. So Jewish rabbis admitted, yes, it's very, very difficult law. We have this law for this, and that law for that, different feast days, and this has to be done, and that can't be done, and so on. But he said, we just can't. We don't think we could explain it just by standing on one foot. It's taken us years and years to master the various books that we have, the ins and outs and the implications. But Hillel raised his hand and he said, could I try? So the pagan king said, yeah, well, I don't care who tries. Anybody, one's as good as another idea. So Hillel stood up and stood on one foot. He said, the whole Jewish law is to love God with your whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And the rest is so much commentary. And put his foot down. It's taking a long. That pertains here somehow, I think, since I think so. What I'm going to do myself is just to give a very, very brief, hopefully brief, commentary on the Constitution and rule in your own prayerful reading and study of it. I'm sure that many questions, perhaps many questions have occurred to your mind, and we can try to discuss those and thrash those out after the end of my own reflections. So these are reflections of a priest, which I think is important. From a priest who's been working with the Institute almost 12 years now, and also from a man's point of view. And I think all that has, that's saying something. At least I'm hoping it's saying something. Because the greatest commentary on the Constitution and rule is the life of an individual missionary who lives this rule. You can read this and you can perhaps understand it, but then when you see an actual missionary, flesh and blood, living it, and obviously it means so much more. Because it sounds good on paper, but you get off the paper into practice, there's a difference there. So I've divided this into 3 parts, and because I have more gall than gall, I've divided each one of the 3 parts into 3 parts. The first impression or idea that I'd like to share with you, after reading these and studying them, for a few years now that I've been working with the Institute, they have always impressed me as being very, very simple. So what? Anybody can do that. There's not much problem there. Isn't everybody doing that? Anyway, they've always impressed me as something very, very simple. And as I think and read more and pray more, they're synonymous certainly with the gospel, which is very simple. I can read it in a few short hours, and a lot of it's repetitious, so cutting out the repetition part, you can summarize it very, very simply. And yet we know that it can't be lived gospel or this. The first point is simplicity, which I say is synonymous with the gospel. Not too many rules and regulations there. General admonitions, certainly words of encouragement to do what we know we already in our minds and hearts have to do, but find it difficult to do unless we get that word of encouragement, say either through this text or through the Bible text, specifically the gospel. And also because it's Franciscan in flavor, it would have to be simple. And apologies somewhat to Bill to be stressing Franciscanism, but when you're convinced it's the best, you know.
I work with simple people anyway.
That's true. You're one of us.
Okay, touche.
St. Francis was very, very simple. And I mean, when I use the word simple in any of this context, unless specifically stated to otherwise, I mean all in a good sense, of course. He himself saw little or no need actually to write a rule, to put something down on paper that if people followed it, you know, they would be spiritual, a spiritual mark of an age or something like that. So his first rules or first drafts, you know, they were just simple gospel texts, and anybody could arrange. Didn't require, in a sense, much brain power for that. But I think what he was telling us through the writing of the rule for the Friars Minor, and I think this is what the Constitution and the rule is telling us, not something new or, you know, you teach these 6 easy rules and fine, we produce a saint. You go through this kind of a process, and this spiritually happens to you. I think what it's trying to say is, you know, you already know the basics. Love God, love neighbor as yourself. And these are so many words of encouragement. To do that, there are, you know, certainly a few specifics in here to focus in, to delineate, to define specifically. How do you love God in this instance? Or your neighbor, how do you relate to your neighbor? Or what do you think about yourself? You know, what do you want to give yourself to? It's a little more specific. Kind of a delicate balance between being specific in general, I guess. But love of God, love of neighbor, love of self. That's, if you do that, that's it. You can't do any better than that, because there isn't any better to do. If you do any less than that, well, it's too bad. And the same way here, this simplicity that impresses me from these two, although there are some very specific, but very, very few, it seems that, you know, you make as many rules, or as few rules as you need to, but as many rules as you have to. And there's always that balance of going to both extremes to stay in the middle. But simply stated, I think this certainly tries to do that. It certainly tries to do that, and has done in many instances. The other aspects that strike me about these two is stability. Has the approval of the church, and you find the various decrees, and that was talked about earlier this morning, which is important. Perhaps, or the church is going to last at the end of time, we know that, and perhaps if the church does, then maybe those things that she's endorsed or approved, at least the ideas will endure, and some of the ramifications may change over the years. But I think that's a big point. At least from my own experience, I have been with several who have asked about the Institute. It's surprising the large number who actually disapproved by the church. I've always taken that as a good sign that, you know, if it's approved by the church, therefore it must be good. In one instance, though, I took it that way. The person had a different intention. If it was approved by the church, it couldn't be good. We started on the wrong foot already with that. But it's approved by the church, and that, I think, gives it stability. Some of the church's stability, the church's permanence, that is trying to continue. That gives me assurance that in working gathers 2 or 3 together with him in the course of a lifetime, and when they're dead, the thing goes out of existence. And yet, if it was good, it seems that it should have those characteristics of permanency or continuation or stability along those lines. Also, the commitment that is made. We were talking a short time before, Manish, you know, that in this day and age, unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be the practice of two anyway, to do anything too permanently. They could decide today, definitely, I'm going to do this, then when the temper, the mood, or the time of month changes tomorrow, then another decision is made. That can be aggravating in many, many ways. That the people themselves, and granted, no argument with that, obviously, but it can be very disheartening to work with a group of people, and yet you don't know if you're going to end 2 months from now or 3 months from now, even though it's obviously, of course, make permanent commitment. You don't know. Things can change. But this gives a little more assurance, in as much as humanly we can have assurance that someone is going to be with us in a year or two so that we can plan and build different aspects of the apostolate. Maybe to this point, the example of my own, how I got involved in this. I went to the seminary towards the Holy Name. Father Stephen often mentioned about the Institute in scripture classes when sometimes it was a toss-up between, you know, what were we learning, scripture or what the Institute of that. That was all to the point, sure. But then my first parochial experience in New Jersey, East Patterson, I was working with a group of people who were involved with catechetical work. And it was always difficulty getting them once you got them, to train them, and once they were a bit trained, and to keep them. And many times, of course, they're not all for very good reasons. But that was kind of disheartening here. The one way the cause of Christ, the establishment of the kingdom, was hampered. Because what you were trying to build with these people just didn't seem to endure that much. And I wrote to Steve at that time and so forth, and mentioned my lack of enthusiasm, because, you know, it takes you 3 months to build it up, and overnight the thing can crumble. So he suggested, well, why not get more involved in this? So lo and behold, I got more involved in this. And it's been a very good experience, because, you know, when you ask one of the Institute members to help you with this, or please do that, or what do you think about it? You know, this is coming out of a stable person. Not that other people aren't stable, but I just have more confidence or assurance in people who have committed themselves by vow and promises, who are really seriously trying to lead a deep spiritual life. That makes me more stable. If I can lean upon somebody who's stable, someone who I know has been formed and is very serious in being formed more and so forth in Christ, that gives me greater assurance in my work. So this aspect of stability or endurance, continuity, impresses me about these two, Constitution and Rome. Also, along with that is flexibility. Perhaps you have had the experience, I think all of us certainly have. You know, in this day and age, and for the past few years, to try to interest the young women or the young men in the religious life, priesthood. And you know what that will entail, you know, whipping them off to a seminary, perhaps miles away, great expense. And they may not have the intellectual caliber all that much, at least in past days when we had to learn Latin. Imagine all the energy that was spent in learning Latin. And guys were asked to leave the seminary because they didn't. I know tried to, maybe we could ask them to come back now, but anyway. But here, we don't have all that kind of perhaps necessary baggage, but baggage nevertheless that could encumber people. Here they can stay in their own home environments. They don't have to go off to the novitiate of any sort. There's no money doing all that much one of the values, which perhaps is necessary that they didn't sometimes work, that is done away with. The person is a little more free. Seemingly it's a little more easier to encourage people to commit themselves in this kind of lifestyle, that flexibility. Although my own personal experience has been, though, it's difficult still to get anybody. They're just not coming by the growth. But perhaps if they understood it more, if we understood it more and prudently pushed it more, it would be better. So that flexibility, that or latitude, maybe what I want to say, maybe latitude is a better word. Here they can stay in the parish surroundings or in the institution or wherever you are working. You just don't have to usher them along someplace. It's a little more acceptable, perhaps, to people, especially in this day and age, and allows them all kinds of great freedom, which, as priests and still as religious, we don't have. You can't be in one place today and another place tomorrow. Institute members can. This rule of the Constitution encourages them even to be much more adaptable, available, flexible. Certainly nowhere, I don't think, with the possible one or two exceptions at the very most, you find all that much restriction. You can just be in anything, any kind of an occupation, at any given time. Fantastic. Adaptability, availability. Which, I think in one sense is saying secularity. The majority of people always have been, are now, perhaps always will be, outside of religious life, canonically speaking, or priesthood. And no matter how much, I really think, no matter how much we try to get involved in the secular world, and how much we should or could get involved in the secular world, we are not, in one real sense that I don't ever see really, can't envision yet, maybe time will go, I can't really envision how we could become a part of the secular world unless we become seculars. So to influence the mass, or leaven the mass of humanity, it has to be like to like, seculars to seculars. The seculars who are the leaven, who are the light, who are the salt, have to be formed. They just can't send anybody out. They have to be spiritually formed, professionally competent, prudent and tactful, all at the same time, to go at the conversion of the world with an untempered zeal, which would be certainly odious and contrary to Christianity. They certainly have to be formed, but it's still secular to seculars. And this secular tone that is given here and constantly mentioned almost on every 2 or 3 pages, you'll find the word secular. That is good. It is shown, I think, very concretely that there is nothing wrong in being a secular. When it says in St. John's Gospel, God so loved the world, I think in one real sense, secular institute people and secular people who are pursuing a real deep religious life love the world much more than, in one sense, we really can. Because we could, and it has been, unfortunately, I guess maybe our occupational hazard at times, to look down upon the world, to spurn the things of the world, to give up the goods of the world. The goods of the world are good, and if used properly, they could be for one's salvation and the benefit of mankind. And I think, members of secular institutes, they're like trying to perform a wedding, as it were, between the secular and the sacred in their one concrete person of themselves. You can live in the world and save your soul. And while we theoretically might believe that, at many times we perhaps might act contrary that somehow or other we can get out of this world. And yet, this is the world that we have. And this is the world that God loves. This is they're trying to wed or bring together in their one person a deep spiritual life, which thoroughly loves, encompasses, embraces, is involved in the world. They're actually living there. And even though you have Medicare and Medicaid and Blue Cross and Blue Shield and all kinds of insurance and a monthly paycheck, and you have to take care of the car and your aged parent, and you have to keep up the fashions of the world and take courses in your own profession, one can, through, with, and in all those things, save one's soul. Not in spite of them, but precisely with all that involvement. And I think this is what they are saying to themselves. They can do this. And I think this is the witness they're giving to the world, too, that this can be done. Their motivation or formation or why they're doing this and how they're trying to do it, of course, comes from their commitment by vow and promises. And that brings me to the third. The first one was simplicity. The other one was stability and flexibility. And this witness. The impression I have from the Gospels, and I say this is just one person's impression, hopefully it's not all that outlandish that somehow or other you don't have the same experience or share the same ideas, but perhaps in a different way. But what it strikes me about Christ is he's very subtle. He's very, very subtle. It's not the, fast punch, so to speak, that how he gets his point across. He's very, very subtle. In fact, he's often saying, right, that he doesn't want people to know that he's the Son of Man and tell no one about this miracle. Very, very subtly he's going about his own witness. I think in a very similar way, this is what Secular Institute members are doing by their vow of chastity and the three promises: poverty, obedience, and witness or positive. In a very subtle way, telling the world that while you pursue the goods of the world for the goods of the world's sake, that we can be poor with the proper use of those goods. That we use them too, but we don't pursue them for their own sake, as a higher value. And in a world quite still, even with Supreme Court rulings, quite saturated with sex, that one still can live a chaste life, and one can be very happy in doing so. And an obedient life. While we don't share the same views and ideas or opinions, I can be obedient to whoever happens to be, as it were, calling the shots at the time, or whoever's the superior or employer, whatever at the time. I think they're saying that, as they say, in a very subtle way, which Christianity, in a sense, is a subtle presentation. It's the leaven. The infiltration or influence is done almost unnoticed, in one sense, until it is too late, until the whole mass is smothered. Too bright a light would scare people away. If it's too salty, that harms food too. Just always the proper balance here. And that witness, I say, while it is very subtle, on the other hand, like a lot of things with paradox, where it speaks so loud and clear that people would accept it. If it came on too hot and heavy, people would shy away from it. And I think that's what this whole Constitution is all about. But I say the greatest commentary is women that you see around here, and the women who you've been associated with in the Institute, who of course have not been involved, and the other members then too, that hopefully you see, talk with, get to know. It's a great, fantastic example, something like I was saying this morning, hearts can inspire, their hearts will inspire. It's somewhat easy for me to live a poor life. Just like, not too bad, an obedient life. Because, it's so regulated, it's so delineated in rules and constitutions for it, that, if I don't do it, with all the opportunity and time I have at my disposal, then how bad am I going to be?
countering with a counter philosophy. Do you think that sharpens the sense of their purpose in life? It keeps them on their toes. It's got to do that, because if you're out in the active world, there's so many things that don't go your way that you have to say all the time, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I wonder if it isn't a sharp vocation for today. You know what I mean?
But you know,
you could almost say if you're parked in the convent, it could flow along with
that's what I was saying.
with a sense of history, and you'd almost be out of date before you notice it. But if you're out there in the secular world, you're not ever going to be, you're either going to stay or go, right? But if you stay, you're going to be sharp, because you're going to always be. You're going to be looking at the philosophies that you're countering and saying why often, explaining it to yourself all the time.
But it can't be as neurotic. And I mean, unfortunately, this impression I say that
Retrospective all the time, but I just mean that seems to be one of the things that says to me, this is good for 20th century right now.
Oh yeah, I would think so. And any time, anytime when there's a secular world, I mean, and it's predominantly secular. In a bad way, many times, and in many times a good way. Just number-wise, quality-wise, what influence has, no, I'm not, putting myself down. I'm convinced of my own religious vocation, but it's the secular world, and it seems that people have to be right in there, in the mud,
It's
the mire, whatever you want to say.
in one sense, it's a confrontation at the same time as a certain living with, but at the same time as a real confronting with values that Christ has passed on to us.
Just for sake of time to time and so on. One of the women who is coming to speak for this tomorrow sometime, Catherine Russell. She's head of the, what department at University of Maryland?
Microbiology.
Microbiology?
That's the University of Maryland.
Virginia.
It's in Virginia.
Now,
Microbiology.
even if I were expert in that field, which I'm not, and if I went down there to talk in a collar or habit, they would say, well, naturally, that's what you're going to say. I mean, your program, the church tells you you have to say this or that about it, if there's any moral aspects or ramifications of it. Which they'd hear me very politely, respectfully, no doubt. I don't. But I don't think it would mean too much to them. I really don't think it would mean too much to them. They just listen to me and say, well, it was a nice afternoon, we had coffee and crumpets with them, and that was it. But when a person like this, who is living with them, working with them, dissecting whatever she has to dissect with them, getting her hands dirty, who's had to go through anything and everything, and she has all kinds of outside, has to go home and take care of this person. I think that speaks more to a lay person than one of us doing it, really.
How do you see the type of life in the whole context of the life of total dedication to God? Is it related to anything from Gospel Times itself? Is it capable of giving the kind of witness which religious orders, societies, common life and so on are able to do? And if you were really told, how do you evaluate this? Where does it fit in? What does it do?
People in the early times, in Christian days, were giving their property